My name is Fritz. I am one of the founders of Firefly and happen to work with the personal lines team and love what we do there. Also with me today, if I'm pointing the right direction, depending on how your screen's set up, we have TJ. He's on our personal lines team and has a background also in graphic design. In fact, I don't want to mean to embarrass you, TJ, but a couple of things you can see on the wall back there, those are your creations, I think, right?
Some of them, yeah.
All right.
They're all over the place.
So TJ is a guy who really does this stuff, and we're just very excited to have you here on today's session. So let's dive in, and actually, we're going to start with this. Some of you have been to these sessions before. It's part of what we do at Firefly called Modern Agent. Short and sweet. It's about helping agents like you to be easy to find, easy to buy from, and easy to work with. And today's topic, which is about branding your insurance agency, I think probably has most of all to do with being easy to find, and is important, we think, because what you sell, your business, your service, can't be smelled or tasted or touched. People can hear and see you, and certainly that seeing portion for you is related to branding. And what you'll see there to the right, there's a book called Selling the Invisible by Harry Beckwith. This is something that I read probably, 22 years ago. It's about marketing service businesses. It's a great book, by the way, that we just recommend. And we'll actually come back to that here in a moment. But what you're going to see in today's session is TJ is going to start in just a little bit by showing you some things that relate to branding. I won't kind of spoil what they are. Actually demonstrate to you how some of those things work and give you examples of that. And then after he's gone, I'm going to show you how we at Firefly have used some of these things, and actually how some of the tools that we're going to share with you, how you might use them to do things like create a logo or a business card or a website, or things for your social media and that kind of thing. Also excited to say that in Modern Agent, we often, not always, but we often have a giveaway. And here, this is an image from one of our first sessions that we did back in November. Louis Roquet, one of our agents in Tennessee, won a 27-inch computer monitor. As you can see, he's pretty happy about that. Today, we're going to have at the end a drawing for a $100 Visa gift card. And also, there will be 3 other winners who will send a free copy of the book, Selling the Invisible. So please stick around to the end. There's just a simple question you answer at the end so that you can be entered into that drawing. So we want to start today with just a quick poll, just to get your take on some things. So hopefully you can see on your screen a question, and you can just click on it to answer, and it'll show the results up above. How do you feel about your agency's current branding? And by that, we're meaning things like your logo, fonts, color scheme, overall look and feel of your image, wherever that image is. So we'll just give everybody about 15 seconds to do that. By the way, I know people who are with us through Click Meeting can participate in this. If you are participating through Facebook, we can see the chat, but I don't think you can click on stuff like this kind of a poll. So we've got some results coming in. It looks like we've got a little over half of you have already voted here so far that are participating here today. We'll let you click a few more. And it looks like, TJ, as we look at what people are saying, we got, 18% of folks are saying, I don't really have it yet. Almost half who say, I've got some branding, but think it could be better. And some who feel, pretty confident about a clear brand standard and use it consistently. We're glad you're all here and sharing that. So it looks like here the the final results. We've got just that mix right about that way. So we hope that wherever you are in that scale, that this can be a process and experience that helps you out with that. So with that, we'll turn it over here to TJ, and take it away, TJ.
Hello, like you said, my name is TJ. I do graphic design. Your guess is as good as mine how I ended up in insurance. But I really enjoy it. It's kind of a passion of mine, and I really enjoy helping you guys as agents as well. So hopefully it is found to be useful. I do want to start with the kind of just the goal, or just kind of setting the expectation. So the goal is to kind of create an awareness around the importance of branding by informing you about some key concepts of branding. This presentation should also help you decide if you want to do it yourself or outsource the design work. Either way, I think this will be a good start, and we will have some just so you guys know, you don't really need to take notes or anything like that. I did put together a PDF It's going to have all this information in it, and you'll get it. And it also has some additional tools that you can use to either do this design work or avenues to find designers to do it for you. So um, to start, we're going to have some definitions. I'm probably going to swing into my presentation and out into a program that I use because I kind of wanted to show you guys some of this stuff in real time. Just kind of give it some meat with the potatoes.
Yeah.
um, so the first thing is dots per inch. So dots per inch number is a number that represents the amount of dots within an inch. The more dots per inch, the clearer the image. So I do have an example here. You can ignore 10 DPI unless you're trying to create like a circa 1980 Mario or something, but that's really not going to be practical to everyday use. What I really wanted to focus on for this is 72 DPI and 300 DPI. Um, Basically, 300 DPI is going to be your print stuff, your business cards, your posters, letterheads, envelopes, packaging, all that stuff. You really want it to be crisp and clear. 300 DPI is going to be the way to go. You might also see PPI. PPI is points per inch, but same concept. Now, 72 DPI, there's a common misconception that 72 DPI is all screens 100% of the time. And that's true if you're making like an app or if you're making a website or something that has to have efficient assets so it runs smoothly. So people will sacrifice some clarity. So 72 DPI is going to be where you land with that. But if you're trying to post an image or design an image for like Facebook or something like that, where they need to compress and handle their speed on their end, make it bigger. Go 150, go 300. It's going to be completely okay, even though that is still a screen. Um, Next, we're going to talk about colors. Um, so the definitions here. So what you're going to see sometimes when you're talking to printers or if you're in a system, you might see CMYK. CMYK is basically an acronym for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And these are the color sets used to make colors in the print medium. The other one is RGB. That's basically red, green, blue. These are the colors that are mixed for digital mediums. And as you can tell right here, they're basically just reverse of each other. RGB, one mix creates CMYK white, and then vice versa. It'll be CMYK mixed to make RGB black. I
Hmm.
don't, maybe they were designing those at different times or something. I'm not 100% sure, but they went different directions. Lastly is hex codes. You're going to see programs that use hex codes. It's basically a color code that represents a color on screen. You'll see it in Word. You'll see it when you're coding websites and various things like that. Now, one thing I do want to show you is we'll hop over to my program. This is not an Illustrator tutorial, so I wouldn't get too wrapped up in like the navigation of it or anything like that. But this is our brand standard. This is how we keep track of our hex codes, RGB codes, CMYK. But what I wanted to show you specifically is if I click on that yellow and I double click on the color, what you're going to see is in the color panel is you're going to be able to type in your RGB code or your CMYK code or your hex code in this instance. Typically, the raster and vector programs will support all three. Um, and you'll be able to use your colors all the time. And the nice thing about this is you don't have to be in one of these fancy programs to do it because you can actually go into, say, Word. I'll hop over there real quick.
Hmm.
I've got a fancy star here that I put together. But if you go to shape fill or anywhere in there and go to more colors, you're going to see the same thing, RGB and hex code. So if I wanted to make Firefly yellow in this F9DC2C, okay, now I have a Firefly yellow star.
And,
It's going to, oh yeah,
yeah, one thing I just want to say with that, TJ, is where this is super helpful is if when you have this brand and this brand standard, the idea is it is the same wherever you go, and it's not like, oops, I just chose a yellow in our case that doesn't quite match, and it just looks a little off or weird. Takes the guessing out of it.
absolutely, absolutely. And it's going to have the overall theme here is going to be consistency. The things you create are not always going to be seen at the same time. And if you make them as easily recognizable as possible, people are going to be like, oh, that's X company. I know what they do. I know what they're trying to sell me or what they're going to do for me. So it's a kind of a slow roll, but once it starts to take hold, it's going to be super beneficial to growth. Next thing I want to talk about a little bit is the types of things you might work with if you're doing DIY or if you're talking to a designer is vector and raster. So with vector and raster, a vector file is basically an image created from shapes, points, and curves using basically a math algorithm behind the scenes. It doesn't really involve any math on our part. If that were the case, I probably wouldn't be doing design. But these can be stretched basically with no loss in quality. So the nice thing about vector is you can design for an app button or a billboard and use the same file and stretch it and shrink it and you're fine. Raster, on the other hand, it's largely going to be pictures you took with your phone or pictures you took with a camera or things that are saved as JPEGs, things like that. It is basically an image created by small pixels of varying colors. These cannot be stretched or else they'll suffer a loss in quality. They can shrink, but the problem is you stretch those pixels out and you start to lose detail, as you can see in the examples on this page. One thing with vectors you'll notice is it's actually these lines around the actual shape built by anchor points and kind of like higher level stuff, Bezier curves, essentially. And then with the raster, you can see it's basically an image. So everything from the whites to the light pinks to the dark pinks in that image are all pixels creating that square. Now, back to Illustrator, I do want to show you. Um, I have two files here. Basically, I took this raster image and I vectorized it. So what you'll see right off the bat is when I select this image, this raster, it's a square all the way around every single pixel in that picture. But on the right side in the vector, it is a picture now made of shapes. It's made of these vector shapes. Every single thing in that thing is a vector shape. Now, one of the benefits of working in vectors, again, like I said, you can stretch it to unlimited sizes. So if I select this raster image and I go to change the scale, let's say I make it 250% bigger, you're already going to see those pixels starting to stretch and they're starting to stair step. That's not going to be great if you're stretching those types of images on whether it be a postcard you're making or a business card or anything like that. It kind of limits you a little bit. That's why vector is so nice. So if I select the vector and do the exact same routine here, and I go up to the same scale, I do 250%, it loses no quality. It's the same picture. You're not going to lose any quality. So I love vector. I live for vector. It's versatile. It's fun. So
Well, and I'll add too, just like from from the agent's really practical perspective, if you're working with a designer, and we're going to show you some places late in a little later in this presentation that you could use to create stuff for you, because for a lot of us, you're good at insurance, you want somebody else to do it. You're pretty much always going to want to make sure that when they're done, that they give you a vector file so that you can on your own do some stuff to zoom it or expand or give it to another designer, right, TJ? So that you're not like, oh
mhm,
shoot, I'm stuck what they gave, and if I want to zoom it, I'm going to lose the quality, and it just doesn't look good. We've all seen that where you got a fuzzy image somewhere. So
absolutely.
again, if you're talking to a designer and you say, hey, well, I get a vector file for that, and they say, I'm not sure what that is, then probably you want a different one.
And another thing to that note is if you are working with pictures and stuff, you'll see later in our little kind of tool kit in the branding guide that you get, there are raster programs on there. So say Photoshop, for instance, if you take like an image in there, you can manipulate a raster on a pixel level. So you can change the colors, alter them, all that stuff there. So there are tools for these types of things. I don't want to like undersell rasters because they have their purpose for sure.
Mhm.
Just kind of like show the difference between the two. Um, Next, we're going to talk about typography. So typography is basically the style and arrangement of type and design on a page. There's different ways to use it. I have a Yoda here. I thought it was cool, so I threw it in there. So you can use words to create imagery. And another way to use type is to just create flow on your page. If you want to direct their eyes to a certain area, the one in the middle is a great example of that. I did want to point out that this person who created that did not take in the fact that they had to put a binding on this book, because the B is non-existent. It just says it's not contributors anymore, but they should have thought of that. But I was noticing that yesterday. And lastly, typically when you're creating a brand, you kind of want to stick to one or two fonts. You don't really want to go beyond that. Um, so for instance, Futura, all fonts have like a font family or typefaces. So even though you're limited to one or two fonts, you really are going to have 5, 10, maybe even in some cases 15 typefaces. So you can use italics, you can use bold, you can use extra bold. And basically you're going to utilize these in ways to create emphasis. And at an inch on an entry level type of design, it gives you some versatility, but it also helps you keep the consistency at the same time.
Yeah, and I'll just add on that, TJ, if I may too, that the thing
Mhm.
about fonts is that if you have, like, if you just say open word and use the default, which is it still Calibri, if I'm pronouncing that right? For
Yeah,
one thing,
it's default.
yeah, the letters you write or this, if your emails or whatever look just like everybody else's. And so if you say, hey, I'm going to choose a font, you probably don't want to use something crazy like Comic Sans or whatever, right, for your font, but you got something that's just a little bit different, and it's always you. Then whether it's on your website, your business card, your emails, letters, documents, the PDFs that you create. Again, people just look and say, oh, they might not even consciously think it, but they'll recognize it. And if you think of brands that you know really well, like Apple, there's a font that they use on almost everything, and you subconsciously kind of associate it with that. And that's true of a lot of brands. And so this is one of those things that might not seem really like super exciting or sexy, right? But it really does make sense to have two fonts and then maybe use one mostly for headings, another for your, the body text of what you do. You'll be surprised how that will make the stuff you work on just look and feel more unified.
Absolutely. Um, the next thing that I'm going to kind of go over here a little bit, and it's something that I see a lot. And again, it's kind of a simple concept overall, but sometimes it's just not known that they exist. So there is JPEGs and there's PNGs. You probably heard of both. Some people don't know the story behind them. So a JPEG is basically a file that uses lossy compression and has a background. There's no way to change it. We talked about it in raster earlier. It has the white part behind it that creates the square. um, what lossy compression means is every time you save a JPEG, it compresses the file so it loses pixel information. So if you saved it, brought it in, saved it, brought it in, saved it, it would lose more pixels. Um, Ping or PNG is a file that uses lossless compression. You're not going to lose that information every time you save it. And the beautiful thing about a ping or a PNG is it can be transparent. And I will show you in the program here a couple things. So here I have two files. They're on a white background. One thing you're going to notice right off the bat is the one on the left is just slightly blurrier than the one on the right. The one on the right is just a little bit crisper. That's because it did not lose any information once it was saved. So that immediately tells us the one on the right is a PNG. So the cool thing about PNG is if you are creating a business card and you want your business card to be your main color, maybe it's blue, like we have here. If you are bringing in files and you bring in a JPEG and a ping, what you're going to notice here is the ping looks a lot better when on top of it. You don't have the floating white box. You don't have to combat that. You don't have to be like forced into a white background. You can bring those things in. It's going to look good. It's going to look clean, and your logo is going to be visible.
And we've probably all seen that too, right? Where you see where someone's put an image on something. I've seen it on Facebook and other places. And it's like, oops, clearly they used a JPEG for that and didn't have the transparency that you can get with the ping. And somebody
Hmm.
had asked, by the way, TJ, can we opt which format we save an image into? And I had responded in the chat that yes, most programs let you do that. Anything that you would add about saving images?
Yeah, so in this particular one, it might be handled a little bit differently. So I was actually going to show you guys some of the options you have when saving them. So when you go up to file, typically there is save as, and then there's export. For me, and on Ping, I usually do export as well as JPEG. So I'll go export as, and what we're going to see here, I'll go ahead and click PNG. you'll typically have a save as type, and you'll see JPEG and you'll see ping. So I'll just save this file because we're not going to use it. I'll go ahead and export it, and it brings up this box. So you can see the DPI or PPI. I'm there at the top. You could go 350 or 72. A lot of times they give you little cheats here. So screen, so 150 is fine. But the nice thing about the ping option is you can do white and black backgrounds as well. But you still get the benefit of that lossless saving or exporting. But there's the transparent option. And again, it'll save it just like you see here. It'll take it out. It won't have a background. And you could drag that into Word. You could drag it into Illustrator, any Canva. If you guys are using Canva right now, there's tons of options. It just gives you some versatility. And same with the JPEG. It does have some. I'll go ahead, Fritz.
Well, I was just going to say too, going back to like, okay, how do you do this in real life? In some cases, you might be in a program. I'm trying to think if you can even do it in Word. You can right click on stuff and save as an image. If it there gives you a choice of JPEG and PNG, I pretty much always choose PNG because it's not going to ever degrade. But the other nice thing here too, you say you're working with a designer, they're making you a logo, they're making you a document or something. We want you to be able to know, hey, I need a ping of this, right? I need one with a transparent background so that you can do this kind of thing and you're not creating something later and you go, oh shoot, I got to go back to that person
Well,
and get it.
coming from
Or if they ask you, do you want a ping? You're not like, I think so. What is that? You know? Go ahead,
exactly,
TJ.
you're there. You'll be present in that conversation. You'll know what you're talking about. And you can also, this is going to be very helpful when talking to a designer because I have people come to me and they're like, hey, I would like a logo and I would like this. And I'll be, okay, what kind of deliverables are you looking for? Do you want files set up for print on a shirt? Do you want files? You want a file with a transparent background? And I'll have to kind of present to them what the deliverables would look like or be. Hopefully you guys after this and having your branding guide will be, you'll be, again, you'll be in that conversation, know what you're talking about, and you'll know what to request and how to use it for sure. I'm going to go ahead and hop back into my presentation. Next, I'm going to talk about like the brand standard. As you saw earlier, and Fritz will probably show again,
Mhm.
we have a brand standard. We give it to designers, video makers, or things like that. It tells them like kind of the story we're trying to tell, like who Firefly is. They can vary in complexities. If you go to like Nike or Apple, they probably got a book 6 inches thick on what to do with their design and stuff like that. It doesn't have to be that way. Fonts, your color palettes, your hex codes, those are going to be very important. It helps people whether they're creating a video or creating a business card for you. The big thing is make sure your logo, when you get it, uses those fonts and colors and doesn't derive from that. Some other three kind of focuses, I would definitely, there's probably a little bit more than this, but imagery is going to be important. Spacing is going to be important and typography. So that's all really just going to boil down to consistency. But imagery, maybe you take pictures of happy families who are well protected and they're feeling comfortable. And that's the story you want to tell. That's what you do as an insurance agent. Maybe it's your family. Maybe it is homes. Maybe you do like insure a lot of specific type of homes. Make sure that imagery is consistent. Same with the actual artwork. You want that all to kind of flow. Spacing, it's just breathability and legibility. You don't want your logos like touching the edges. A great example of that is down here on the, these are kind of fake, by the way, but the Birdland one. They have a nice clean logo. They have consistent colors across the board. And the big thing to remember here is people are not going to see these things all at the same time. And you want them to be able to see that business card and recollect that cover photo on Facebook and be like, I know this place. I've seen it. I've been there. Eventually, it's going to build a brand so strong that people are going to know you. They're going to know the story you're telling and they're going to know what you can do for them, which is really the goal at the end of the day. um, here. So lastly, I'm going to go over a little bit here is setup. Again, this graph is in the branding guide. Basically, it's just knowing your setup, what you're designing for. Maybe it's a business card, maybe it's a screen, maybe it's a presentation like this one. But the main things are your DPI and your color coding. If you try to do RGB on a print item, your yellow is not going to be yellow. It might be orange. It's just not. It's not going to do what you want it to do. So just know those setups. And I will kind of give you an example of that. here. So I'm just going to go to File, New, and this is the palette to make a new file. So the big thing you want to focus on is, am I designing for a billboard? You're going to want to do probably feet and inches. If you're designing for a business card, it's just going to be inches. If you're designing for a screen, you're going to be looking at pixels. Um, if I do a business card, inches, we're at 3.5 by 2 inches. You can manipulate your orientation, whether it's landscape or portrait. Some people like to get fancy. Some people just like the old school. Um, One thing, and I'll show you a little bit more about this, is bleed. Typically with print, you're going to want to operate with a bleed unless it's a white background. I'll show you a little bit more about that. And then down here is color mode. We're working on a print item, so we want to make sure we're on CMYK color and high 300 PPI or DPI resolution, because we really want those crisp lines and we want it to look good on that print after print. If it's for a screen, you would simply just go, okay, I'm going to design for a screen. You typically want to know what you're designing for. If you're designing for a 4K screen, you'll want 4K resolutions. If you're designing for a cover photo on Facebook, you're going to want to know those pixel dimensions. Those all can be found via Google. You can Google cover photo for Facebook dimensions. They're very easy to find. If you're designing for a specific size postcard, the dimension, say you're ordering from Vistaprint, you can get those dimensions from your setup sheet. You typically will have like an eye or something you can like hover over, and you can get those dimensions. For this particular one, we're just going to say we're designing for computer screens. So we'll do 1920 by 1080. We'll just do regular orientation. We do not want to bleed. I don't know why that was on that big of a bleed. That was intense. And I'm going to do RGB, and then we'll do it for screen here. Now, if you see something like this, I do have an eye here. That just means my previous thing that I created was CMYK, and it's just letting me know, like, hey, that's not the same thing you used last time. As long as you know where you're going, that's going to be okay. But that's basically how you would set them up. Like when you go in, it's going to be pretty universal across the board, depending on which system you're in. That would be how you set them up. Now, I do have one thing to show you. I wanted to talk a little bit more about that bleed. And all that means, and something more practical for you guys. We'll use a business card for an example here. Typically, when you set up a file without a bleed, it'll look like this. It'll have a black line. What that black line is, that represents basically the edge of your card, or in the design world, trim line. If you do not have a bleed, when it prints, unfortunately, these printers still have to have rollers that grab. And what you're going to notice is it's going to have white all the way around your card. And if you don't want that, the bleed is going to be your best friend. So what you would then do is set up your file with a bleed, and that bleed will then, it'll show a red line on your file type, and you'll want to drag your image out to that bleed, and all of a sudden this black line becomes your trim line. And when they trim that card, that blue is going to run all the way off the page, and it's going to look more like this one, where the image actually runs off the page. It's going to look cleaner. You're not going to have the white bars, and you're going to achieve the look that you actually originally envisioned.
Yeah, and I could even just say, and I know we're just kind of on a small screen here, but like we put this postcard together for our Firefly agents about Modern Agent. And so when we did, we used Vistaprint. And so it has a thing where it shows this trim line and bleed line, so that like in this case, our image would go all the way to the edge and not like leave a kind of an ugly white line around the side where it shows like, oops, they didn't quite know what they were doing. I think, is that what you got for your part, I think,
Yep,
TJ?
that
Okay.
is all I have for today.
Well, and what we're going to do is show you some real life examples of ways that you do this, but I'm also going to put the branding guide, let's see, that TJ has been referring to here in the chat. And so if you are in, we'll also email it to everybody who's registered automatically after the session. But if you want to download that PDF, it's not what TJ's just been showing to you, but it's actually just the I think it's a 3-page summary of all this stuff, just so when you got something designed to work on, you can see those things. But what I'm going to do here is a couple things and how we'd use this in real life, and show you some systems that you could also use to do this stuff, whether you want to do it DIY or work with somebody else. For starters, I just thought, now that you've had a chance to see everything that TJ showed, this is Firefly's brand guidelines, our brand standard. This is it. If TJ's right, I mean, big companies will have 100-page brand guides on like all this minutia about different places it appears and how it is. But for us, it just summarizes the colors that we use. It's got the codes there for it. On the left, it's got the 2 fonts that we use, and then also those are the different uh, ways those fonts can be done, whether it's bold or heavy or light or thin. That's all within that same one font family. That's what TJ was talking about before. So if you were to be whether it's the images and text we've used today, or stuff on our website or ebooks or all that, we just try to use the same stuff everywhere, and this helps a bunch. By the way, other real life thing, we have a marketing company that we're working with recently. They said, do you guys have a brand standard? Yep, we've got it. Credit to TJ, by the way, he created this one. We email it off. They're like, great, thank you. This makes our life so much simpler. Or we had some video stuff that we were working on recently, and we just send them this, and you don't have to say, that just doesn't look or feel quite right. So you don't have to make anything quite like this. You might just have a Word document that says, these are the fonts I use, these are the hex codes or the whatever for the colors I use, and that will just help you later. TJ and I have done enough of this stuff. We have probably most of these codes memorized in our head right at this point. But wanted to give you a real practical example. Logos. Branding is about much more than just logos, but logos matter because it's probably the single element that appears in most places, in the most ways, and is probably the thing you think of most. If you think of brands like Nike or Apple or just your favorite restaurant or whatever, you can probably visualize their logo. And we really love the logo that we have. We are not creative geniuses at Firefly and did not create this ourselves. We used a company called 99 Designs. Now, in the PDF that's in the chat there, and then we'll email to you, it will have links to the companies that I'm showing you here. So you don't have to write these down. We're not going to type them in the chat, but you'll find them there. Anyway, 99 Designs is not the only place that does this. In fact, we'll show you another one too. But what they do is you can either work with a specific designer or have a contest where you say, for example, I want to have a logo. And in fact, you can see some of the things they've got here available, logo design, brand identity. Hey, that's kind of what we're talking about right now, just even more than just a logo. Website images and that kind of thing, packaging, t-shirts. You can choose what you want to do. And in our case, we said, we want a logo. And what we did is they said, well, what colors do you think you might like to use? They had a few questions they go through, what kind of feeling are you trying to get from it? Are you wanting something that's modern or something that's, kind of has an old-fashioned, old-timey feel, like some brands do? Anyway, you put in what it is. And the way it worked is there was a contest. I'm trying to remember if the total cost for us might have been like $1,500, $1,800. But we had where like the winner of the contest would get, I think, like $1,000. And I think second and third also got some money. Well, the idea here is it's motivating a lot of people to want to, compete and provide some designs. And there are different levels of contest you can do. It doesn't have to be as big as that. But I thought you might be interested to see that these were some of, we got like over 300 logo designs that people put together. And some of them really creative. And some of them were like, well, we're not going to do that. I actually showed you, included here some of the better ones. But as you can see, a huge variety in what people do. And actually, what's neat about this kind of system and other companies that do this is you can then give feedback to the designers. So in the case of this particular image that somebody put together, Ben had this note. He said, hey, my first thought of this logo was that it was a bug's head on a windshield wiper. But I see that it's actually an F, which is clever. Could you make the F narrower or something? So you can actually, even with these designers, you don't just have to take what they give you. You can actually suggest things or ask, hey, could you do that with a different font or whatever? So it gives you a lot of flexibility within that process to come up with what you want. So in the case of ours, the designer who did it was a package that also included a business card. We're virtual, so we don't use these so much anymore, but it was this business card design, which we really liked. And so when we're done, we got the logo in various variations. We got the business card file. We got them in various file types so that we could give them to printers and others that we worked with, so that it could actually be turned into the stuff that we wanted to do. So that was 99 Designs. That was our real life experience with it. Another company that does a very similar kind of thing is Design Crowd. By the way, it's possible that there are designers who work on more than one platform, so you might see them there. Oh, and I could add that if you really like something that a designer has done, like like our logo, for example, they do some work for you and you like it, you can then go back and just contract directly. I say contract, I mean, it's just done online. You say, hey, could you make a PDF for me? Could you make a flyer for me? Could you make an image from a Facebook page or whatever? And they'll say, yeah, I'll do that for, 30 bucks or whatever. And you say, great, let's do it. So once you find somebody you like, you don't have to keep going back to the contest kind of a mode. Another one here is Fiverr. Now, Fiverr is a little different in that you generally will choose a designer and just pay them a small amount of money to come up with a few things for you. So again, the link will be in that PDF. This is an example, the kind of thing that you can have Fiverr do, graphics and design, writing stuff, video, music and audio. So this could be useful to you for more than just logos and stuff like that. But if you choose graphics design, again, here's some examples, everything from logos to what have we got? Graphics for streamers. I think I don't know if they mean YouTube, streaming or something like that. But
Hmm.
you've got package and label design, brochures, posters, flyers, podcast cover art. I mean, you can basically there's just so much here that you can do. And basically, what you do is when you pick the one that you want to do, and this is the logo design one, it'll start showing you here are these different designers. Here's examples of what they have done, and then you could choose one. And like I'm going to lean in here a little bit close. Like this person's, their designs start at $25, starts at $10, starts at $40, and they basically just say, hey, this is what my time's worth. If you want to work with me on something, and you can say, hey, I'd like you to create 5 logos for me, and I can pick from one, and maybe it costs you 50 bucks. So now you might not like any of them, and in that case, you just probably use another designer, right? So that you can, try it again. It's not that expensive and lets you do that. So that's Fiverr, really useful for a lot of different things that way. Casey Barnett is saying in the chat, he's used Fiverr in the past to make short video commercials, inexpensive and turned out great. They'll even wear your logoed clothes. I didn't know that. That's pretty cool, Casey. Thanks for that comment. So Fiverr, there's a lot of stuff there beyond just what we're talking about today. As far as like working with some images, if you want to do it a little bit more DIY, again, these links are on the PDF TJ made. Vector is a free online, it's a web, what do I want to say, a browser-based program. You don't have to download it, that lets you work with vector files. So if you have some, you can work with them and not have to be necessarily an Adobe Illustrator expert or whatever, right? Now, if you're working with more like a traditional raster type file, if I'm pronouncing this right, Pixeler. Sometimes these names get a little, I know they need a domain name, and Pixel ER was probably already taken, but this is a program that you can use. It's just browser based, lets you, take an image and like add stuff to it. Again, I believe this one is mostly free as far as your ability to work with them. And of course, there's some programs with Windows like Paint, and Paint 3D actually lets you do some ping work just right on Windows. So anyway, these can be useful and they're free. In terms of putting stuff together, like to actually put on your website, which is probably where most of your stuff is going to go, or your social media, a couple programs that are out there are Canva. Canva is pretty well known. You might see their advertisements. They have some free features, and you can pay a subscription to get the full ability to do everything. And whether it's creating videos, presentations, logos, maybe you want an Instagram post, maybe you say, I need a Facebook cover page. We'll have like a template, a size for it, and say, okay, here's the basics. What do you want to put in there? And lets you do some drag and drop to do that kind of thing. What we use here at Firefly is Adobe Express. Like the other, it has some free stuff. It has some paid stuff. But if you've seen any of like our Modern Agent Minutes videos, I make the thumbnails for that here in Adobe Express. Also, some of the you actually can see some of the bits of projects that we've done down there. But again, whether it's a Facebook post, a flyer, an Instagram post, and they've got all sorts of templates you can use. But what I would say is you probably just don't want to grab somebody's template and throw it on your page without making it yours with your brand colors and your brand fonts and stuff like that, right? Obviously, you don't have to, but that would be our recommendation.